We all have stuff we're dealing with, stuff from our past, stuff that's happening right now. And sometimes we don't even know what to call them. We're just like, something's not right. Well, Monica DiCristina joins us today, and she helps us figure out why it's important to name some of these things so that we can start treating some of the things that we're struggling with. We talk about so many fun things today. We talk about gaslighting and shame and anxiety, but of course, all of it is around how do we get better? How do we help ourselves navigate through this life, through this world that we're in? And so it's a great conversation. So sit down and enjoy this episode of the Live Faith First podcast. We all experience pain, anxiety, grief, fear, shame, but too often we don't know how to name it. Now, Monica DiCristina is here today to help us find the words, understand what's going on beneath the surface, and take a step toward healing. When we can name our pain, we can finally begin to move through it. So, Monica, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation. I enjoyed reading through your book, and so I think we're going to have some fun stuff. It's going to wander around a little bit, so be ready for that. But
yeah, that sounds fun.
Super excited. One of your stories that stood out to me because I really connected with it. You said you're going on your first vacation with your husband without the kids, and just kind of the catastrophic imagination you had prior to that trip. So I can't wait to dig into that. We'll save that for a little bit later.
It's very common to do that. Yeah.
Yes. My wife is getting ready to travel in a few months, and I've already started the thoughts. I'm like, what are you doing? I just read Monica's book. I should be better at this by now. So before we get to that, would you give us the cliff notes of your life? Just a little bit about where were you born? Where were you raised? How did you get to where you are today?
Sure. I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, but I am half Spanish, half American. My dad is from Spain. And I became a therapist because I struggled with my own mental health for over a decade, and I had parents who loved me and cared about me. I went to every church event I could go to. I tried so hard to find help, and I just couldn't. And when I finally saw a therapist, he gave me names for my pain, which is where the source of the book comes from. And it really changed everything for me. It was so eye-opening that I thought, if there's one thing, God, I can do in my life, I want to help people like I was helped. And so that's what started my career in my early 20s. And since then, I've been chasing after how to help myself and help other people understand what's going on in their lives, because so often we just get really lost and we don't understand. We don't even know how to listen to ourselves. And so that the cliff notes into my career, that's pretty much it. I'm married and I have 3 kids and 2 very terribly behaved but cute dogs.
That is awesome. We just added a second to our household as well. Second puppy, I should be clear, not a second child. We're done with the children thing.
Yes.
We're waiting on more grandchildren.
Great.
But yes, dogs, they're a thing. It's funny. We're like, they're now sleeping in different places in the middle of the night. So you get out of bed in the middle of the night or something, and you're like looking on the floor, taking your phone with you to light the way.
Don't trip over them. Yeah.
Exactly. Kill them, step on them, any of those things. So
I can relate.
I'm going to start at the beginning by kind of popping around a few different subjects, and then we'll get into the naming piece. But you talk a bit about gaslighting. And so we're going to start there today. Would you tell us kind of what is gaslighting? It's kind of a term we hear these days, and what's behind all that?
Gaslighting is a very popular term that, was formed based on an old play where a husband would dim and raise the gas lights in the house and made his wife think that she was losing her mind. Gaslighting is very unique in that the person who's experienced the gaslighting doubts their own perception of reality. That's the real insidious nature of gaslighting. Whereas sometimes people invalidate us or dismiss us, and that, we can all do that without meaning to. But gaslighting really is a manipulation in a lot of ways, because it says, no, you can't trust yourself. You can't trust what you're perceiving. And that's what makes it so dangerous, because it plays on people's self-doubt. And then they don't know what's true anymore.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the person who does the gaslighting? I mean, every time I hear this story, I'm thinking there's somebody who's doing this, isn't that kind of, it seems very devious to me.
Yes,
Is there
I
any
would
other
say,
way than devious, right?
yeah, I would say, there's definitely experts on gaslighting, and I'm not that person. So I would say, as a practicing therapist, most people doing gaslighting are maybe don't mean well. But I think there is the occasional person who is just manipulative and just is trying to get their needs met in such a way, and they have such a low self-awareness that they just keep trying to get what they need, And I think that can happen, of course. But I mean, like a gaslighting situation could be you report to your boss that someone used inappropriate language with you. This boss does not want to deal with that. They don't want to fire this person. They don't want to call HR. So rather than dealing with their discomfort or hard feelings, they begin to cast doubt on your perception of reality. I'm sure you just made too much of it. Oh, I know that person. They're never like that. I've never heard anybody say anything like that. And so in that way is like a small everyday example where the boss has a vested interest in changing that person's perception of reality. Does that make sense?
That does.
Yeah.
That actually helps a lot, because
Good.
I was thinking like somebody who's just like the story, like trying to drive my wife nuts. And so dimming lights and pausing TVs from the bedroom, like, why? What is happening here? And the frustration from the other room. So I'm usually doing it from a good place just because I think it's funny for the TV to pause, but
Right. Yeah.
Okay. I love that. Let's talk about another something. And this happens across society, but I think maybe more in church because we love to bring our spirituality into it. But sometimes people say some really good intentioned things that just end up brushing off or minimizing or putting a silver lining on a really difficult thing. And can you talk a little bit about maybe some examples of what maybe those good intentioned comments might be and how they're not as helpful as we might think they would be?
Yes. And sometimes these are referred to as spiritual bypassing. Sometimes they're not officially that, which is just using spiritual language to bypass someone's pain. I mean, an example from my own life is I struggled to get pregnant with our first child. And really well-meaning people said to me, oh, if you just stop worrying, it will help. Or God is trying to teach you something. If you just obey God, this will happen. And it turns out I had a physical issue that was the reason. And so I think sometimes people are misplacing really powerful and perhaps sometimes helpful spiritual language on a situation.
Yeah. And you know what? People, I think you're right. People do they don't know what to say. It's like we don't have a response, and there's something in us, it seems like, that we have to try to fix it. Like somehow it's incumbent on us to come up with 15 words or 5 words that'll be oh, that changed my situation or my fear or whatever it is. And so what do we do instead of that? I mean, again, sometimes it's just an uncomfortable, I don't know what to say here thing. And so I'm going to say the platitude, but are there things that we can do that help that are better than what we do sometimes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest things is to give yourself permission to be unhelpful. Like, again, when we want to help, that's often when we make the biggest messes because we rush in, we oversimplify, we give just too basic of advice. And if we could just slow down and say, I hear you, I'm going to be with you on this, I'm listening, I don't know the answers, but I'm going to stick with you until you find them. I think that can be so much more helpful that we're saying, I know this is going to be a journey and I'm going to be with you. If you'll allow me, I'll be with you this whole journey. And that all of a sudden puts us beside the person rather than the fixer of the person or their problem that we just honestly may not be qualified to fix. Even though we're well-meaning and we care about them, just allowing ourselves to be limited humans, I think is one of the best ways to love people. Not limited in that we turn away, but limited in that we stay connected and we acknowledge that I'm with you, but I can't fix it.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Okay. I'm going to give one other example around that. So that's great if like we're close, family member, somebody that we're really connected with. Do you have something you do for the person in the church lobby who, kind of peripherally, and they've decided to kind of just open their heart to you for a moment and tell you about a struggle that they're having? you may not be walking with them fully, but you still want to acknowledge their pain. Is there a way kind of for that, that outside peripheral person that you?
It's a great question. It's a great question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is to listen with your face. So often we think we're listening, we're trying to listen, or we get a phone call or whatever, like really give this person who chose to be vulnerable, perhaps at an unexpected time, the dignity of your full attention. And I think we underestimate the dignity of full attention, how soothing that can be for another human, because so many people walk around without that dignity given to them, right? Mm-hmm. So I would just start there and allow them to finish the story, and don't fix it. And then say, wow, that must have been really hard for you to share that with someone. Thank you for trusting me with that.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And as a pastor for 17 years, standing in the lobby on a Sunday morning, you would often get that. And I got to be honest with you, it'd be really hard for me to just stay focused on the person and their eyes in front of me, because there's people walking around, and somebody sometimes will come up and want to talk to you.
Yeah. You see someone waiting.
Right. You see somebody waiting. Yeah. Anyway, all of that. So it's not simple, but I love that presence, giving someone that dignity. I think it's huge. And if we can start doing that, and it helps us. Let's go back to where you started. Give yourself permission not to fix it. That's
right.
Okay.
That's right. It is okay. And truly, that is when I see us make the biggest messes, was when we really have decided we've got to fix this person's pain. It's just, you often can't, Yeah.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
All right. One more kind of, tangent question here for you. I'd like to talk a little bit about boundaries.
Great.
Can you talk to us? What are boundaries? Why are they important for us to throw those out there? And how do we do that in healthy ways? Because sometimes it feels like I'm just being the mean no guy because I said, I set up a boundary. So tell us a little bit about boundaries.
Boundaries are where you end and I begin. And boundaries are what you're responsible for and what I'm responsible for. It's like I'm responsible for brushing my teeth, paying my bills, taking care of my children unless there's a crisis. You're responsible for the same. But very often it can be really confusing, and it's really scary for people to say no. And oftentimes, which I write about in the book, people have a hard time saying no because they were only loved when they said yes. And so that's one of the things that I love helping people discover about boundaries is, why is it scary for you to say no? Why do you feel like the bad guy when you say no? Where does that come from? It comes from somewhere. And genuinely, people like it when we say yes more often. And so if you are going to start to change, it's important to remember that you may be less convenient for the people in your life. But that, loving God, loving yourself, loving your neighbor can really include having limits, can really include only doing what you're able to do. Again, like giving yourself the permission to be a limited human, I think is a huge part of boundaries. We have big hearts. We want to help people. We want to serve God. And sometimes we burn ourselves out. And then ironically, we resent the people that we wanted to love well, and they can feel that, right? That doesn't end up going well either.
Yes. And it doesn't, when we set up boundaries, for one of the things that helps me is this is going to let me be better for my family. This is going to let me be better for those that I love. And even if the boundaries, I don't know if against is the right word, but it's set up against a family member or against somebody. Yeah. And again, I'm not sure against is the best word there, but even in that case, it's still between. Thank you. There we go. Is creating the right place for me also to be healthy. Now, I'm going to ask you one other quick thing around boundaries. What if you're the person who is the one who's receiving the boundary? There's somebody else. I've had that happen. And in fact, I told somebody you need to have healthier boundaries around what you're saying yes to. And then she turns around and says no to me. And I'm like, how could you say no to me? Like that boundary wasn't for me. That was for everybody else. So what do we do when we're the recipient of a boundary? How does that go?
Yes. And I think it's such a great question. I think remembering that boundaries are not personal. When someone sets a boundary, they're doing something for themselves, not to you. not against you. Now, we're human. We've got our own stories, our own relationships. So it's hard sometimes not to take it personally. But I think one of the biggest, most freeing thing is to think about, I don't have to take this personally. And one way to really love this person well is to celebrate their no. Like, that's one way for me to open-handed love them well. And it may be inconvenient. I may kind of have my feelings hurt a little bit. I may be disappointed. I may think, oh my gosh, do they not like me? And it's okay to feel all those things, and just to normalize that, just allow yourself to feel those, but don't put it on that person, right? And just, weed through those feelings, talk to someone else about it, and let that person set that boundary, And the cool thing is, boundaries, I feel like, are reciprocal. The more we allow people to set boundaries, the freer they feel. And the funny thing is, the freer we feel. Like, well, they said no to dinner. I don't really feel like dinner. I guess it's okay. I guess we can still be friends, and I can say no. It really builds on itself in a really healthy way.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. It was funny with this person who told me no. I remember like in the moment, like, what? Yeah. And then like your brain starts just flying, right? And then finally it's like, wait a second, that's what I suggested she do. And I didn't picture it this way. Right. And I did actually cheer her on. I'm like, good job. Sure. Good job. Yeah. You're right. That's a great boundary. I'll figure it out on my own. That's my problem, not yours.
It's funny when people take our advice, and it includes us.
Right. Exactly. All right. So you are a practicing therapist. Mm-hmm. Have your own practice, all of that. Now, one of the things that you talk about in your book is how we dig into some of our childhood experiences and how that's affecting our present. And I just want to ask, like, how important is that? Because there are some theories of treatment and therapy that kind of don't dig into the past. They just like, okay, we're here, let's move forward. And then there's others that spend a little more time there. Why have you found that digging into our past traumas and difficulties has been impactful for your clients?
I mean, it's a fantastic and big question, so I'll answer it the best I can. I think that who we are today, unexamined, is often a result of the coping we developed to feel okay in the world. So your family is your first social group, whatever that looked like. And you learned the rules about how to deal with people. You learned about your identity. You learned about whether you can count on people or not. You learned whether or not you can have a need. And so you take that forward, again, unexamined, right? And so the power of looking into your childhood is not to cast blame. It's not to point fingers at mom or dad. It's really to set you free. It's to carry forward what's good and beautiful about your family. And it's also to make different choices. But what I've found over and over again is that we cannot choose differently when we haven't examined what we're unconsciously choosing. And that very often, from attachment to anxiety, to our identity, to how confident we feel in a podcast interview or in a job interview, comes from our family of origin or our early experiences. And so I'm sure there are lots of theories that say all different kind of things, but I've found in the field, right, in the room, it's so helpful to see light bulbs go off. Now, light bulbs are not the same as change. They're insight, right? But they're an essential first step to understanding, oh, this is why I feel the way I feel. This is why, when my husband is late from work, I think he's not coming home because dad didn't come home, right? We put together the pieces, and instead of yelling at our husband, we can have compassion for ourselves and to speak to that younger version of ourselves. Hey, that was really scary, but you're safe now. And he's a reliable person. He is coming home. And so we begin to change our relationships when we understand where our patterns come from.
Yeah. That is so good. That is so good. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's a great, I love that answer. I love that. That's so good. One of the things I'm going to tag on to that you said there, and you said something to the effect of, when we do that, sometimes we don't want to do it because we feel like we're going to insult our parents or denigrate our upbringing. And my parents are doing the best they could, so I don't want to think ill or find fault. Can you talk, how do we navigate that a little bit? Of like, hard. I don't want to throw them under the bus, but that kind of ended up being a bad thing for me.
Right. Yes. It's really a loyalty bind for people. It really is.
I love that.
Especially if you know your parents meant well, but also especially if your parents were very well respected in a community. It can be hard to admit the truth. One of the things I often tell my clients is that I think about it like this. If I was driving my car and I hit my best friend in her car and I damaged her car and she got really, really hurt, I love my best friend. I didn't want to hit her car. I didn't mean to hit her car. I didn't want for her to be hurt. But the reality is the consequence still happened. And so I think about that with our family of origin. They really genuinely may have been doing the best they could. Maybe they were mentally ill. Maybe they were tired. Maybe they were working 2 jobs. Maybe it was just a different time and they did the best they could. And that should be honored, forgiven when necessary. But that doesn't change the impact of how it affected your life. And I think we can really hold both of those at the same time. I can have compassion and understand my parents did the best they could, but I can also honor my pain. Me dismissing my pain and acting like how they treated me didn't impact me actually doesn't honor them, and it keeps me stuck. So I think, being able to hold both.
Yeah, good. That's so good. I love that. And that is a thing. Not every parent, but I think a lot of parents are really trying to do the best with what they have.
I do.
And also for, my parents' generation and before them, the way they examined their life was different than we do today. And so, maybe they didn't go through some of the things that we can do now around therapy and things that we can do to be better parents today. And it also humbles me as a parent, as a dad, that I have a joke and I'm spending the money, but like, okay, I got to put money in the therapy jar for my daughter for that one.
Yeah.
So,
yes,
because I know that I'm doing stuff and I'm not intending to. Like, it's not like, oh, let me set out to make my daughter's life terrible today.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. As a parent myself, I mean, and I sit with all these adult children, I think, there will be things that I've done and that's just the reality. And, having compassion for the generation before us, is part of practicing compassion for ourselves. And hopefully we will receive the same compassion as we all just do our best. Now, there are certainly exceptions to that for people listening, of people who were not doing their best. And so I want to honor that. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about, parents who were really doing their best and made some messes.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. Okay. So the premise of your book is that when we name our struggles, we name our challenges, we name our pains, it starts to make a difference. What's in the power of naming our pain?
Well, you can't heal what you don't understand. You can't soothe what you don't name. You can't, find the right medicine if you don't have the right diagnosis. And what I've found through all these years, not only with my own story, but all these years of practicing, is that people don't understand why they're hurting. And it's oftentimes a step that we skip. When I was writing this book, I was like, well, this is not hopeful. It's like, look at your pain, everybody, and talk about it. But the reality is, starting there, which we often skip, is what helps us come back home to ourselves, to who we really are. And so it's just an essential step that I really believe is like a posture, so like on a hard Tuesday, if you feel like you're irritable with your spouse, well, if you name your pain, what happened? Did you have a bad day at work? Somebody hurt your feelings? That can really help you to have compassion for yourself, do what you need, and not act out. Right.
Yeah. That's so good. I love that analogy of, we think of that with our physical bodies. Like, let me go get a blood test. The doctor says I'm low on such and such. Okay. Well, I'm now going to take the right medicines to offset that. And I will think of that for my physical body. But when it comes to my emotional life, it's like, let me just gut it out. It's fine. It'll go away. Let me ignore it, or however. That's a great analogy. Thank you.
Yeah. It's so similar, but we have such higher or less loving expectations for ourselves when it comes to our mental and emotional health, right, than we do for our physical health. We just expect to I'm just going to grit my teeth and just, maybe I'll feel better tomorrow,
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Which was how I feel like my wife and I, and I'm sure my parents and grandparents and so on before us were raised. You're like, just, the joke around here is my father-in-law would say to my wife, Penny, when she was 15, 16, 17, Dad, I think I'm going crazy. She told him, and he's like, nah, you're fine. Go on, get out of here. And like, that was literally it. Like, there's no like, maybe you are, maybe you aren't. I'm not acknowledging it. And,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
there's, what's this mumbo jumbo you're talking about now about feeling those
Yeah.
feelings. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. It's really, yeah. I mean, and I think so many of us have experienced a version of that, you know, it's like, you know, and that one's funny now, but I'm sure there's so many people listening who, you know, had a version of that was just left them feeling pretty alone, right? You know, like, well,
yeah.
I guess I'll just get over it, you know?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And that was my wife's experience too. Like,
Okay.
okay,
Yeah.
I don't know what that means, but I guess I'm moving along. And so, and anyway,
Yes, absolutely.
a few decades later, she's trying to figure out what that meant. So,
Yes. Yeah. I have so much compassion for that. Yeah.
So in the naming, here's one of the challenges that I sit with, and especially as our daughter's 20, and so she's good, straight in Gen Z. These kids crack me up because the things that they have normalized so many things that as when I was in college is something like you don't talk about that. Like if somebody was taking, you know, meds, mental health stuff, like don't tell anybody. Just don't tell anybody.
Not.
Take them on the side, hide that pill bottle, you know, whatever it takes. And yet, you know, my daughter's like, no, everybody's taking a little bit of something, so we all talk about it. So my question here, though, is when we name the pain, how do we keep from like making that our identity? Or when we name the diagnosis and like, well, I'm just ADHD, so that's why I'm forgetting, or whatever it might be. And so how do we navigate that? I named it, but I don't want that to define. I don't think I want it to define me. Maybe I'm wrong on that. So talk to us a little bit about that.
I don't want it to define you or anyone either. I think that, you know, naming pain or naming a diagnosis or receiving a diagnosis, I feel like is not a free pass. You know, and I feel like that's somewhere where popular culture around mental health has really failed people. You know, because you're anxious, it's not a free pass not to do things. It may be harder for you, and that should be honored. And we want to cheer you on to do what you need to do, but it's not a free pass to treat people certain ways or not do your responsibilities. And I think that gets really confusing for people. And why that makes me sad is because I think it makes people less open to the beautiful vulnerability and to the most important part about understanding our mental health, which is really finding freedom, you know. But I do think it's an important conversation that people, that it's easy to kind of camp out there, but that is definitely not the way I work. The way I work and through the book, it's like you get lost in pain, but you name it to head home. You name it to head home to who you really are, to the best version of yourself, to the freest version of yourself. Now, the freest version of yourself may still struggle with anxiety sometimes, but that has never been your identity. Now, and part of what I really want to focus on in this book is separating your identity from your pain. You're definitely not your diagnosis or your pain. I just don't think that serves people well. I don't think it ever serves people well to reduce them to one thing anyway. You know, whether it's a diagnosis or anything.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Have you found any tools that kind of help people keep that in mind rather than like, I'm just giving into it. Like that defines me. That's who I was. This happened to me. So that makes me A. And like, are the tools you have to help people kind of separate an identity from, no, that was just an event and it's hard and I don't really, you know, but I need to move on from this.
Yeah, I think that the tools I use most often are separating people from the painful narratives and the truth narratives. Now, the painful narratives are the stories we believe about ourselves from painful or just difficult things that have happened to us or in us in our lives. The truth narrative, I believe, is the God-breathed truth, groundedness of who you actually are. And so much of healing is not a before and after. It's a constant choosing between, here's this painful narrative that keeps coming for me. Here it is again. And I'm going to choose not to believe that again. I'm going to choose to believe this truth. And I think that is such an important thing, going from old to new. Yeah.
Great. That's such a biblical concept, right?
Yeah.
Where Paul talks about this renewing of your mind and those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
One of my seminary profs, he said, your mind is like a photo album.
Mm-hmm.
And you flip it over and there's a photo that defines you. This is who you are, except it doesn't. And if you put it in the light of Jesus or in the light of God, God would say, no, you're not the child who that happened to.
Right.
And he would say, you need to find that other picture, and you need to cover it up and not to hide it away, but to say, anytime it comes up that you still look at that old picture, you're like, no. God gave me a new picture, a new something of who I am so that I can live into that reality. I can live into that identity.
Love that. I love that.
So, let's talk about that first vacation you took with your husband. You describe it. You have 3 kids. You're going on a vacation, and all of a sudden, these catastrophic imagination goes off. Talk to us a little bit about that event.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the funny things about anxious thinking is that it's often an unhelpful coping skill. Skill is too generous of a word. But it's the way we cope with vulnerable feelings. So I was going on this trip with my husband. I was so excited. We've never done anything like this. But it was super, as a young mom, or a mom at any stage, I'll be honest, really vulnerable to be away from my 3 kids. I was worried about it. And instead of honoring and hearing that, and even hearing some of the sadness about being away from them, I jumped up into an old familiar thing, which is anxious thinking. The other thing is that oftentimes happiness is vulnerable. We don't talk about that enough. And, Brene Brown teaches a lot about that being joyful is actually one of the most vulnerable feelings because it can be taken away. And very often she calls it foreboding joy. People, when they're experiencing just the best moment or something exciting for them or someone else, they jump into a terrifying thought because it's just so vulnerable. So I think that sometimes when we're doing something big or someone we love is doing something big, it feels vulnerable. And if we can just drop down from the anxious, scary ideas we're thinking about to that vulnerability and just name, like, this is a big deal. I love this person. I'm going to miss them, or it would be really hard for me if something happened to them, and I'm just going to hold that feeling, and we just stay there. We're much less likely to jump up to those ruminating thoughts that just are not helpful. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that really does. Let's talk about that joy and happiness thing, because I get that, where like you kind of get into that mode, and then I'll sometimes get the too good to be true thoughts, like, or this is going to come crashing down soon, or that kind of thing. So, what tools can we use to either maybe it's good to stay in the happiness place, or fight the others and put them away? What are some things we can do to kind of help us enjoy the moment of happiness or joy?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this is going to sound like a platitude, so I promise you I don't mean it this way, but back to Brene Brown's research, is she says with this foreboding joy is to practice gratitude. And gratitude, what it does is it brings you back to the present moment. So I really think about gratitude. Everyone talks about mindfulness and how important it is to be present, and I agree. But it can be kind of airy-fairy, like, what does that mean? And for me, practicing gratitude helps me actually be present in the moment. And when I'm present in the moment, I'm feeling the happiness more. I'm feeling the vulnerability. I'm feeling all of it. And I'm less likely to get lost in other things.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's good. I guess I've only done actually one podcast this year on gratitude, but that is a theme that just comes up so often. And just putting ourselves in that place to, the old song, count your blessings one by one, whatever it is, to enjoy the moment of, I am sitting here with my, my wife and my daughter, and let me just enjoy this rather than I got a text from work or I got something. And so just, like you say, just how do we, staying in the moment.
Just looking at each thing around you. And again, gratitude is it's just so over talked about in a way that's not helpful. People just feel shame that they're not more grateful, when it's really a shortcut to being present in the moment. Wow, I'm grateful for this tea. I'm grateful for this conversation. I'm grateful for air conditioning in Atlanta, and then I'm back in my body, right?
Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. All right. Going to talk about some shame, anxiety and stuff here. So let's start with shame.
Okay.
Super fun subject. We all love
Super
talking
fun.
about it.
Yeah.
What is shame? What role
Mm-hmm.
does shame play in keeping us stuck? Can you just
Mm-hmm.
talk
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
kind of the ugliness of that? And
Yeah.
yeah, let's start there.
Shame is an all-consuming feeling that you're bad. Shame is never specific. It's never accurate. It's like a cloak. You know the invisibility cloak in Harry Potter? You know?
Yes.
Where-
Yes.
so
Yes.
you just disappear underneath it. That's how I always think about shame. It just covers your whole identity. And it's never true. And it's really the fear of losing connection and belonging. That's really at the heart of shame, is that I'm bad. And why would it be bad to be bad? Well, it will be bad to be bad because then you won't be loved anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's insidious. And I think everyone struggles on some level, but it's completely different than conviction, right? Like conviction is like a knife through butter. It's specific. I didn't return my library book. I ran that red light. I used a rude tone with my spouse, right? Whereas shame is, I'm bad. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've said a few times that I feel like humans are shame machines. Like we're just wired, like, and because I see it in, like I told you earlier, I was a school principal.
Yeah.
And so I start to see shame coming out in kids in like third grade, like 8 years old, 7 years old, but definitely by fifth grade, like fifth grade,
Definitely.
they're in it. And you're thinking to yourself, what have you done in your life
Yeah.
that,
Right.
that would really put that shame on you the way it does? I mean, it's why, I mean, I guess you've answered that question to some degree. I mean, we all desire love and we're afraid we're going to lose that, but is there a way to postpone that till later in life? Is there a way that we can help our kids be better at like, navigating that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, again, to cite Brene Brown, I think that one of the ways would be to normalize vulnerability, right? And I'm just not using vulnerability as a buzzword. I'm saying to normalize imperfections, to normalize mistakes, to normalize forgetting to turn your homework in, or saying something rude to your friend and having to apologize. That a lot of times people feel shame because they have a real and kids often do, like black and white, all or nothing way of thinking. It's like, I did something that I regret, so I'm bad. Whereas if we can normalize humanity a little bit more, forgiveness a lot more, there's so much more space to be lovable, still belong, be accepted, and be imperfect, which is truly what we all are.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, I was been thinking a lot lately, apparently, because I'm thinking about forgiveness and grace, in the last couple of days, and just thinking like, we don't find our way to perfection. Like I'm here. I've been following Jesus for, I don't know, coming up on 50 years, something like that. And trying, not every season of life trying, but most seasons of life aiming towards like, let's do things that honor God. And yet, here I am, and, not close to perfect. I prove that daily. And so kind of navigating that, I'm not going to always get it right. I am going to get it right sometimes. And I don't know that I can even define myself by either side, right? The always getting it right or always getting it wrong, because it's not that. And then I don't know, there's some, how grace interact. Like when I get to heaven, there's going to be a lot of questions of God about grace. Like,
how does this all work?
How much does this really cover? I guess I'm here, so it covers everything for me anyway. So
I hear you.
How do we? Do you have any things that help us navigate kind of the mind tricks, mind games we play, kind of those ruminating thoughts? Are there things that help us? Maybe it's partly it's naming, but are there tools that you have that help people? Help people?
I mean, I would say it's really what you were describing. What comes to mind is the permission to be human, is the permission to be flawed. And again, that your identity is not your best performance and it's not your worst decision. You're a child of God. You're a beloved person, and that is who you are. And sometimes you will make fabulous decisions, and sometimes you will do something you regret. Again, not a free pass, right? And we're accountable for every decision we make. But I think separating your identity from what you do or from this idea of trying to get it all right can be such a relief that who you are is already loved, and that's not going to change. Whether, I really just have never believed that I was that impressive to God, right? I never believed anything we could do would be that impressive.
Yes.
But I've also come to really think, I don't think he's as worried as I am, either, and
Yes.
so I just think like separating that is really helpful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, that's good. I sometimes I think I'm really impressing God, like, oh my goodness, look at Elliot today. What is going on?
Gold stars. Yeah.
Right. Gold stars all the way across. 5 gold stars for him today. Yeah. It's ridiculous. It's laughable to say, right?
Sure,
because,
of course,
we
normal.
have the creator of the universe, perfect, all knowing, all powerful, looking down on us and like, that one is standing out today. Of all the billions of people, all of time, Elliot is standing out today. So I'm grateful that I think he can look down on me and pay attention to me, though. I'll be honest with you. He's got enough.
I agree. That is, I would say one of the greatest gifts of having a faith to me is feeling like God cares about me.
Yeah.
In the small and in the big. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that is. And just and we'll talk about anxiety in a second, but that idea of I can bring my cares, my worries, my anxieties to God, and the small little, what might seem insignificant, my puppy just did this. Lord, I care about my puppy. I think you do too, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And permission to bring our cares, bring our cares to God. Permission, though, to appreciate who God is, though, too. I think that's the other big piece for my time with God, is to acknowledge, like, you're the present, listening God. So thank you for that. So.
Yes, that's good.
All right, let's switch over to anxiety for a second here. Super,
all the fun topics.
Super fun one, right?
Yeah.
You talk about it being a symptom of something deeper. That if we're struggling, sometimes we think anxiety is the thing, and often potentially it's just the red light on our dashboard of our life saying, hey, there's something going on.
Yes.
Talk about a little bit about anxieties and how do we dig into that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that sometimes we just carry alarm systems in our body that are old. They're from an upbringing, they're from previous experiences. And sometimes when we're tired or hungry or we had a hard day, the alarm bells go off. And I think what we can mistakenly do is we take the alarm bell that we're feeling physiologically and we begin to look for a reason why. So let's say I wake up anxious and my body's just anxious. And then I'm like, why am I anxious? Oh, something bad's going to happen today. Something bad's going to happen to someone I love. And then I'm off to the races, right? Whereas I think sometimes it can be, and it all depends on the person and their story, but it can be freeing for people to learn that, oh, I can just soothe my body. I can just practice deep breathing. I can go for a run or a walk and try to calm my nervous system down. I don't actually have to go on some terrible scavenger hunt to find out why I'm anxious. I can actually listen to my body and calm it down. I sometimes, I don't know what you think about this, but I sometimes think about our bodies like soothing and guiding an animal. And of course it's us, but imagine a skittish horse. You wouldn't walk up to and be like, what are you afraid of? You would walk up to it, and I'm not an equestrian, but I would imagine you would walk up to it and you would be calming, right? And you would practice calming behaviors to tell the horse you're safe. And I think sometimes our bodies, for historical reasons or present day stresses, right? There's a lot happening in the world, just send off alarm signals. And I think we need to be more empowered to just calm our bodies physiologically without finding the needle in the haystack of the one thought.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. And what are some soothing techniques you suggest? You talked about deep breathing and taking a walk. Are there any other things kind of maybe around a lot of these things, but particularly maybe anxiety?
Yeah, around anxiety, sure.
Just help us kind of.
Yeah. I'll say one thing about anxiety before we talk about breathing or anything is that anxiety is an overestimation of the problem and an underestimation of yourself. Now, that's not a definition I made up. It's one many people use, but it's so helpful because it's saying this thing is too big and scary and I'm too small, or God's too small and I can't handle it. So it's things have gotten out of proportion. But I would say one of my favorite things for anxiety is deep breathing. And if I heard this right now and I wasn't in mental health, I might roll my eyes, so I acknowledge that. But the thing about deep breathing that we often don't understand is that breathing out longer than you breathe in, and breathing in specific ways, which you can just Google. Okay. So everyone listening, just Google, deep breathing or the cyclic sigh. And it tells your body, without your brain having to be in charge, you're safe. So some of the things that we practice are going to be bodily messages for bodily needs. Like the other thing really is, moving your body. Now, some people are not able, but that really helps reconnect your brain. Like when we're feeling anxious, we're in our fight or flight state, and it helps bring your prefrontal cortex, which has rationality and logic, and it's called the map maker, brings it back online. So moving your body, walking up and down stairs, 5 to 8 times, you will start to calm down. I often tell clients too to run their hands under cold water. And what that does is it brings you back to the present moment. And, people talk about the grounding. I'm sure you've heard 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And sometimes that can be too complicated for people. So what I say is just, name everything around you. So, if I were driving my car and I felt anxious, which happens to people, be like, I know how to drive a car. My hands are on the steering wheel. The Google map is working. I've got my air conditioning on. I know how to do this. I can feel the seatbelt. You just sort of name what you're feeling to come back to your body.
That's so good. And last Thursday, long story short, our daughter was home. We came home. Yeah. She was here with a boy, and it just became awkward very quickly.
Yeah, sure.
And this, I've never met him before. And so in his anxiety, he ran into the closet, our daughter's closet, which was really what is happening? So anyway, 20 minutes go by. And at first my wife and I just kind of sat in the backyard, kind of waiting, okay, I don't know what's going on. This is
It's not what we expected.
Anyway, at some point I walk in, I'm like, dude, you got to go. No, it's so anyway. And when I'm doing that, my adrenaline gets flowing and all that. And I wasn't yelling and screaming. It was actually fairly calm, but it's still all of this. And I after he left, I'm like, you know what? I'm not responding to anybody in what is in my body right now.
This
is adrenaline. This is not anxiety. It's something a little bit different. So I did. I went for about a 20-minute walk, and I have to just work. This has to get out of my system, reuptake wherever it's going. I need it here. And it was not a serious thing that happened. It was not serious. It's just,
but it was awkward. Sure. And
it was highly awkward. And then as a dad, you're like, okay, something's got to go. And it's you, boy. So I'll get on out, sir.
But that's brilliant. And it takes about 20 minutes for our body to calm down. And I think probably what you did was you completed a stress cycle. Oftentimes something like that happens and we don't move our body, and then it just builds and builds and builds and builds, or we let it out on somebody, right?
And I've done that too many times. And it was like, you know what? I at this stage of my life, I can recognize actually what this is. And rather than digging in, and again, it ended up being more innocent than it appeared at first. But it was like, no, I got to walk this out. And there was no other way to get it out of my system. There wasn't a, anyway, so
it's brilliant.
Do you have anything else to say kind of about how our physical, emotional, how it all plays together, how our emotional lives and our physical lives kind of interact?
I mean, I just think that it's all more connected than I think we even realize. And I would say my field of mental health is, you hear everybody talking about their nervous system. When I was first being trained, nobody was talking about that, at least not where I was being trained. And I just think it is so much more connected than we realize, which the good news about that is that you can use all different kind of tools to help yourself. like when you went for that walk, that was a physical tool. You didn't sit down and write your feelings or, like you just moved your body so that that stress could move its way out of your body and you could come back to how you wanted to react or how you wanted to engage, And so I think it's simple, but it's also so connected. And so when you're taking care of, moving your body, taking care of yourself physically, getting sleep, you're actually impacting your mental health. And sometimes when people are in a really deep depression, it besides medication, it surprises people that sometimes the advice is start a routine, a 10-minute walk, take a shower, eat a protein breakfast, drink water, because it's all so connected.
Yeah. I love that. This is not something you talked about in the book, but I love the subject. Can you talk? Do you have any expertise in sleep that you can tell us, like some of the power that sleep might have to help us with our mental health? Is that an area you feel comfortable in?
I have no expertise. I'll say that. So full disclosure, okay. I never want to present myself as more expert in any area that I'm not, but I do have anecdotal experience, I would say that it really impacts people. I would say that people who are not sleeping well tend to be more anxious. They can even tend to be more depressed. They definitely tend to be more irritable. And sometimes getting a good night's sleep changes everything. It changes your emotional response. I've experienced this in my own life. It's like, I know well enough now that what feels so stressful right now, I'd really like to go to bed early, so I won't tell you what feels so stressful right now will feel different after I sleep in the morning. And part of that is that our nervous system gets to calm all the way down. And that does wonders. It does wonders for couples too. I see couples and I say, don't fight at 11:30 or midnight. You don't have to do that. That's not true. Go to sleep. And I know it's hard to go to sleep when you're upset about each other, but you will have such a better discussion in the morning when your nervous systems have both gotten to reboot overnight.
Yes. That's so good.
Yeah.
We all love to pull out the don't go to sleep and,
we do.
Angry.
Yeah.
And I kind of have translated that to like, don't be angry for days and days and days.
That's good. That's a great, helpful way to reframe that.
I know my wife and I, dude, we're no good past like 7:30 or 8. Like 7:30 or 8, it's just like, it's starting and like, you know what? Yes, that's no conversations, nothing of any significance anyway. Like, hey, what time should we set the alarm anymore. For tomorrow? Yeah. Right, exactly. It's all gone. But we can wake up at 5 a.m. and have a brilliant conversation.
That's right. I know. All the things. My husband and I tried it. 3 kids is hard. We try to go for a walk every morning, with our dogs. And that's, the best time for our brains and emotions to have these conversations, right?
Yes. Way more peaceful than if we try to hash it out before we fall asleep. So, Monica, I have loved this conversation. I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
What's exciting you right now? It might be a project, something happening in your family, a Bible verse, something you're working on, but something you think about and it makes you smile.
I would say that what comes to mind right now, there's probably many things. But what comes to mind right now is the idea for my next book. I feel like it's, it's kind of in that, I don't know if you ever had this when you were a kid, but, you get to bring the eggs home from elementary school and they're incubating. I remember in our dining room, there were eggs incubating. And so I feel like it's just incubating, I can feel it. I'm all these little ideas and I'm noticing things and thinking about things, but I'm not putting pen to paper yet. And it's a fun stage. It's a really fun stage because I think what I like most about writing a book was writing a book, It's really fun. It's fun to create. So that I think is good. Yeah.
That's very cool. I love that. I love that. Well, Monica, thank you for joining us today. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. There's so many good things for people to grab onto. Tell people a little bit where they can find resources.
Sure.
I'm pretty sure you have a website with a bunch of cool stuff on it. So tell us about that quick.
My website is monicadicristina.com and there's no H in DiCristina. That is a very common mistake. And I'm on Instagram, Monica DiCristina. And then I also have a Substack newsletter, which is my favorite place to connect with people. It's just, Instagram with its, algorithm and short form is tricky. And so I love writing on Substack. And yeah, I would go to those places and I'll share what's coming up. And
Okay.
it's been so much fun talking to you, though. I really, really appreciate it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you, Monica. And for everybody out there today, let's go live faith first. Hey, you're still here. That means you enjoyed our conversation with Monica today. Wasn't that so much fun? There are so many things rolling around in my head that I'd love to talk about, but here's the one thing I'd love to know from you. What is that physical thing you're going to do when anxiety strikes? It hits us all. It happens. Maybe it's the deep breathing. Maybe it's going for a walk. Maybe it's choosing to be grateful for the moment that you're in and looking around and just kind of getting tactile, feeling the world around you. So let us know in the comments, what's that one thing you want to do the next time anxiety strikes to kind of help take that away and reset you? All right, everybody, let's go ahead and live faith first.